Hello and welcome to the 11th episode of the Green Bean podcast. I can't quite believe this is the 11th time I've sat down here and done this. It's definitely getting easier, I think. It doesn't feel quite as weird to sit down in front of my camera. Welcome to my studio. A especially warm welcome if this is the first time that you are watching us, or welcome back if you've hung out with us before. I'm Katie. This is my best friend Jack, and we live in Devon, which is in the southwest of England. This is a podcast about my creative practice, which is mostly drawing, that's my job, and also includes quite a lot of knitting and some sewing. And I also share some of the walks that Jack and I take in and around Dartmoor National Park, which is very close to where we live. It's been quite a while since I've recorded an episode. It doesn't feel like a long time to me because I've been extremely busy, but I think it's been about 6 weeks, so I've got lots to share with you and also lots that I can't share with you because I've been doing quite a lot of client illustration work. But there's lots to catch up on. So yeah, in this episode I've got a new drawing project to share with you and some exciting news about what that project is for. I've got a new knitting cast on to talk about and two sewing projects, one of which I'm wearing and one of which I'm about to begin. And I hope you enjoy joining us for a little chat about what I've been up to and a lovely walk that Jack and I took a week or so ago. I am so excited to share my new illustration project with you for a number of reasons. The first and most obvious of which is that it involves sheep, and as a knitter and fibre lover you will know that I really love sheep, and I'm particularly fascinated by the fact that in the UK we have so many different breeds with amazing different characteristics. So really if you can imagine a product made of wool, then you can find a breed that has the right kind of wool that's really well suited to that project that you want to make. And I love that, and I love learning about that. So for ages I've wanted to create and illustrate a poster of British sheep breeds as part of my own interest, I guess, and learning about wool and using it as a chance to really get to know those breeds a bit better. And then I was offered an opportunity which I could not say no to, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity to bring this British sheep breeds poster to life. And that is that I am going to Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I'm not just going to Edinburgh Yarn Festival, I'm going to have a pop-up stand where I will be selling some of my illustrations and products with my illustrations on them at Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and I am so excited. For those of you who exist outside this bubble of the knitting world, then Edinburgh is really the most exciting, well-attended international knitting event that we have here in the UK. It's a lovely event, really well organised, lovely to go to. I've never actually been as a member of public. I've been twice working for Blacker Yarns. The first year I went was actually before I was employed there. I went they paid me for the weekend to be some extra help, and then shortly after that I got my job there, and then last year 2018 I went there as the team leader at Blacker Yarns, looking after the stand. So it'll be nice to go in a different context as myself, if you like, with my own badge on. So I'm going to have a stand just for a couple of hours on each of the 3 main days and on the Sunday event as well. selling some of my work. So I have to make some work. And the first project that I'm working on is this scratchboard piece of British sheep breeds, and it's going to cover all 72 breeds and group them by, so the British sheep breeds are grouped into mountain breeds, hill breeds, let's see if I can remember, medium breeds, fine breeds. Those two things refer to qualities of the fleece, the micron count of the fleece. Luster breeds, and then there's a huge group that is called naturally coloured, which I have to say is my favourite. That includes Hebrideans, Castle Moritz, Black Welsh Mountains, all these amazing natural fleece colours that we get. So I thought while I'm working on this, I would just let you watch me through the process of drawing one of these 72 sheep that I have to draw. I should probably talk about the breed of sheep that I'm drawing. It is a white-faced woodland, which is a breed that I actually hadn't heard of until, actually it was less than a year ago. I was lucky enough to visit Gam Farm in the Yorkshire Dales, and if you hop back a few episodes to last summer, you will see some footage that I took while I was on the farm. It's a farm in Yorkshire that specialises in keeping rare breeds, and one of the breeds they keep is the white-faced woodland, which is very rare indeed. I believe it almost went extinct a few years ago. So it's really nice to see a farm working to keep one of these more unusual breeds of sheep alive. I was also lucky enough to be able to buy some yarn that had been spun from the white-faced woodland sheep that they had on Gam Farm. It's very kind of crisp textured, and the yarn I bought was a singles, lace weight singles. I bought 3 50-gram balls. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. I think I'm probably going to experiment with naturally dyeing it. It's quite a, you know, some breeds produce quite a yellowy cream colour rather than a white cream. It's quite a warm colour. So I think I might try over dyeing it with something and see what happens. Okay, that's him done. Before I talk about my knitting today, I wanted to take a moment and show you my favourite project bag, which, if you follow me on Instagram, you will have already seen, but it deserves a second mention. You might recognise the little guy on there. So this was a special commission that 2 lovely friends took on for me. You might know them. They're Jules, who has the yarn brand Woollenflower. She's a natural dyer and produces gorgeous, gorgeous hand-dyed yarns, and Lorna, who is Stitchbirdie, and they collaborate together creating embroidered pouches using recycled tweed. So Jules makes the pouches and Lorna does the embroidery, and I guess it was about a year ago, maybe not quite that long, I can't remember. I got in touch with them and asked if they would take on a commission for me to make me a tweed pouch with Jack on it, and they very sweetly said yes. I understand this is not something that they want to do for everybody or on a regular basis, so I was really touched that they took the project on. So apart from having my dear and adorable Jack on it in the most lifelike representation you could possibly imagine, actually, has some of his actual hair on it at the moment. But yeah, I can't believe what a lifelike job Lorna did just from a photograph of Jack that I sent her. It's beautiful. So it's a plique work. There's wool felt for the shape of Jack's body and these rocks, which are clearly Dartmoor rocks, and then the green stitches and the stitching on Jack's fur is all hand embroidery. But as if that wasn't special enough, the actual tweed of the pouch comes from an old skirt of mine, and it's a skirt with a long story. I initially found it in a charity shop on something like my 24th birthday, which was a long time ago, and I wore and wore the skirt. I think I had it in my regular rotation for about 8 years before a small terrier, who shall remain nameless, got excited when he was playing and bit a hole in it, and I still wore it for another year after that with the hole in it, but it was starting to fray and I was starting to worry that I was going to lose my favourite skirt. So I think it was a couple of years ago I cut a sewing pattern from the skirt, so I have a paper pattern that I can use to replicate it, and I now have my first replica skirt, which I wear just as much as I wore the original skirt. So I felt comfortable and okay to send off the skirt to Jules and to have her turn it into a bag, which she did. So this very fabric used to be my skirt, and underneath this little dog here there is a hole which he chewed into the fabric himself. So yeah, it really is something incredibly special, almost so special that I don't ever want to take it out of the house, but I also want to show it off and enjoy it. So yeah, I thought that you might like to see and hear a bit of the story behind it before we get onto what's living inside, which is almost as gorgeous as the pouch itself. So I have a half object, as it's called in the podcasting world. I have a single mitten for my right hand. This is a Persephone mitten designed by Emily Foden, who is also the dyer behind Viola Yarns, and it's a pattern from her new book Knits About Winter, which I got last year. I'm really pleased with it. It's a really well-fitting mitten. I followed the pattern to the letter. I didn't make any modifications or adaptations at all, apart from using a different yarn, which I'll chat about in a moment. But yeah, I'm really happy with the finished mitten. The only problem is I need another one. And if you know me at all, you will know that I struggle with knitting second objects that are the same as the first. I'm not a very good sock knitter. I'm not a very good mitten knitter. I love having the finished project, but I don't know, something about that second project I struggle with. Nonetheless, I have cast on and made a fairly good start on the second mitten, and I'm almost ready to start increasing for the thumb gusset. So while I work on these, I thought I would revisit my my sort of half commitment that I made in my last podcast to monogamous knitting for this year. And I say half commitment because I did not firmly commit to it, rather consider it as an experiment. And I didn't make any rules, and I am aware that this already sounds like I'm backtracking on my commitment, and that might well be the case, but let me explain what's going on. So yeah, like I've mentioned before, I struggle with having too many projects on the go. When I'm stressed or anxious, I love casting on something new. I find it really soothing. So when I've had a particularly busy time, I tend to find that my works in progress have procreated in my knitting collection, and I just have so many that it then starts stressing me out, which is the opposite of what knitting is meant to be. So I found while I was working on the Christmas stockings in December that I felt like I was making really good progress on them, because I was working on them monogamously, and that made me think, well, maybe I should just work on one project at a time. Which is what I have done since then. However, I have had an extremely busy start to my freelance year. It's astounded me how quickly my work has taken off, and I'm so grateful for that. It's been incredible. I've been doing some really lovely commissions for some really lovely people, and generally working really hard, which is great. But there are two things that happen as a knock-on effect from that, which is I have less time for knitting. I'm working long hours. Well, the thing is, I'm not really working long hours. I'm working about 8 hours a day, which is an average day, but I take 1.5 to 2 hour dog walks during the day as well. So by the time you factor that into the day, it's sort of 8 o'clock in the evening by the time I finish my work, and yeah, I'm tired. So I don't have lots of time for knitting, and also if I've been drawing for 8 hours a day, I really need to rest my hands. I can't just carry on doing something that's fine work, tiny needles, really gripping with my hands. I need to give them a rest. So all of this is a long-winded way of saying that I've been doing less knitting lately, and that's what made me wonder if monogamous knitting is not quite the right thing to commit to. And here's my reason. It's because if I only have one project that I'm allowed to pick up, because let's be honest, at the moment I still have those 8 works in progress that aren't finished. It's not that I have magically made them disappear and I just have one work in progress. I still have 8 unfinished projects. If I'm only allowing myself to pick up and work on one of them, and if that happens to not be the project I feel like working on in the 1 or 2 hours a week that I'm finding to knit, then I'm not knitting. And so actually my knitting progress as a whole has really stalled in the last month or so since I finished the Christmas stockings. It might also be that I am completely sick of knitting after the Christmas stockings. I recognise that that's a possibility as well. But anyway, it's got me thinking that rigidity is generally not the best way forward for me. Absolute rules don't work very well. So I'm thinking about being more flexible with my monogamy, but that means if I am picking up more than one project, just taking the time to be considered and mindful about what I'm picking up and why, and if I'm feeling that overwhelming desire to cast on something new, just taking a moment and thinking, rather than casting on with gusto, I guess, just to think about how I might feel in a week's time when that's yet another unfinished work in progress and I still haven't finished that beautiful cardigan that I started knitting a year ago that actually I would quite like to wear because it's January and it's cold. So a few words about the glorious yarn that I am using for this project. There's a little bit of a strange story that goes along with it, but it's beautiful and it's absolutely perfect for these mittens. It will surprise exactly nobody that I chose green. Green is my all-time favourite colour, and some people would say the only colour of yarn that I buy. And that was very much true on my first ever visit to Yarndale, which, if you don't know it, is a yarn festival in Yorkshire in the UK. And I went to it in 2014. It was the first ever yarn festival I'd been to, and this yarn was one of my purchases, all of which were green. So here it is. It is a 100% Gotland 4-ply that I purchased accidentally. It's from the Little Grey Sheep, which is a company based in Hampshire. A lady called Emma, she has the sheep. They're Gotland, which is a silver grey breed, and they're kind of lustrous and shiny, so it's got this lovely, the way it catches the light really picks up the colour, and the yarns are all hand dyed as well, so it's got this really amazing depth of colour. And I say that I bought it by accident because I purchased 3 skeins from her stand, which I thought were all the same thing, and they weren't. So I came home with 2 skeins of lace weight and 1 skein of 4-ply. And I had intended to buy 3 skeins of lace weight to make an enormous shawl or a garment. So I was kind of gutted when I got home and I didn't have quite what I thought I had. They were the last 3 skeins in this colour on the whole stand, so I couldn't have swapped them for what I wanted. But as it turns out, I'm now actually quite grateful because this yarn is just perfect for these mittens. I couldn't imagine them being in any other yarn. I'm so pleased with the way that they look and the way that they feel. They've got this gorgeous halo. I know they're going to be super warm. So yeah, a happy accident, I guess. And I'm sure that with 2 skeins of lace weight I can make a perfectly adequate shawl when I get round to using it. So it's very pleasing to me that I'm finally using this yarn that's been sitting in the stash for a while I figured out what to do with my shopping accident. Now the pattern for the Persephone mittens comes with a separate pattern for mitten liners, which I think I probably will knit, but in all honesty I don't think I'm going to be able to knit them quickly enough for this winter, so I probably will just start wearing these as soon as I finished. I've just got to the point where I'm ready to start increasing for the thumb gusset, so hopefully it won't be too long before I've got a nice new pair of mittens to wear before it turns to spring. So I mentioned that I've been doing a lot less knitting, in part because my hands have been really tired from drawing. One thing that I can do when my hands are really tired is sew. I find the action of scissors quite difficult, but I use a rotary cutter for the most part. So I've been doing a little bit more sewing than usual, which is really nice. I'm going to get my hair out of the way so you can see my dinosaur dress in all of its glory. Now this was not going to be the sewing project I was working on next. I think in the last episode, possibly even the episode before, I was talking about a brushed cotton checked dress which I was going to be making next, and I've got that ready to share with you. But in one of my local fabric shops, it's actually a general craft and haberdashery shop, I found this dinosaur fabric and I just couldn't help myself. Now it's quilting cotton, and other sewists among you will know that quilting cotton isn't ideal for dressmaking because it tends to be a little bit stiff. And I always say, oh that's it, I'm not going to make dresses out of quilting cotton anymore. It's not the softest fabric to wear, but it's got dinosaurs on it, so it just had to happen. And the pattern I used is View P from the Formal and Little Black Dress book. It's a Japanese sewing book by Yoshiko Suguri, and it's a pattern that I've used before. I used it for my Paris dress last year, and it's my favourite dress pattern. I think it's safe to say it's my favourite. I'll be using the same pattern for the brushed cotton dress as well. But for this version I made quite a lot of changes, and the most obvious one is the Peter Pan collar, which I drafted myself. I used a tutorial from a website called The Thread. I'll put a link in the notes down below. If you're ever looking for something that I've mentioned in the podcast, by the way, I try to keep as detailed notes as I can down in the description box below. So if you're ever looking for a link to something I've mentioned and you can't remember what it was, or I didn't put it on the screen, it's almost always going to be in the notes down at the bottom. So I drafted a Peter Pan collar using this contrasting fabric. I also used it to make a waist tie, which isn't part of the pattern. I just cut some long strips, sewed them, flipped them inside out and fixed them into the side seam. I dropped the waist. Again, this is a pattern with an empire waistline, so I lowered it to sit at my natural waist. I put pockets in because what's the point of a dress without pockets? And the final modification I made was I added some rickrack around the cuffs of the sleeves. And somebody on Instagram pointed out that that looks a little bit like Stegosaurus trim, and now I'm in love with the dress even more. So yeah, I've been getting quite a lot of wear out of it. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention actually, because it's quilting cotton, it doesn't have a lot of drape. So I got some of this stuff, which is lead tape that you put in the bottom of curtains to make them hang. It comes in lots of different weights. I got the lightest one that I could find. So it's little lead weights inside a tube of, I don't know, nylon or something. It comes in a bag of, I don't know, 250 grams I think I got. And you cut a length of it, and I slipped it inside the hem of the dress, so it gives it a little bit more drape. And I'm really, really, really pleased with the effect. In fact, so much so that it makes me a little bit less worried about sewing other dresses with quilting cotton, which is great because I've got quite a lot of quilting cotton in lovely prints in my fabric stash to work with. I have made a start on my next sewing project, which is the burnt orange brushed cotton dress. The fabric I bought from Ray Stitch in London in November last year, and I washed it, ironed it, prepared it, and I actually cut out the pattern at the same time as I cut out the dinosaur dress. Cutting out is definitely my least favourite part of sewing. It's stressful for me finding enough space. As a messy person, clearing enough space to spread out a sewing pattern and cut it is tricky, which is why I do it on our dining table. So I cut them both out at the same time so I'd have all the pieces ready to go. And then I decided that I wanted to insert a lining, and it was waiting for the lining fabric in the post that made me decide to forge ahead and make the dinosaur dress first. But now the lining fabric is here for the brushed cotton dress, I'm ready to get on and make a start. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Green Bean podcast. I really enjoy sharing these little snippets of my creative work with you, and I hope that you've enjoyed sharing and seeing a little bit of what I've been up to. Now, one more bit of exciting news before I go, and that is that I have set up a Patreon for the Green Bean podcast. A few people have suggested that I give it a go for a while, and I thought I would try it out. Now, before you worry, the Green Bean podcast as you know it will not be changing at all. I'm very keen that I want to have this channel carry on as it's been going. I think people like it, and to share content like this for free on YouTube. I want to continue doing that, but I'm not able to do it as often as I would like, and I know that several people say that they would like to spend a little bit more time with me and Jack. So I'm offering the Patreon as a way of you spending a bit more time with us. I'm going to pop the link in the description box below for you to go and find out more, but I'm planning to share extra videos, vlogs, behind the scenes, all kinds of bits and pieces for patrons, and yeah, it will just be a way of you supporting the podcast and a way of me offering a little bit more. So if you want to find out a bit more about that, it's in the box below. And with that, I think that's all for this time, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care, and thank you so much for watching. Bye! Now, Jack wants you to know that he's feeling a little bit sorry for himself today because he's just had a shower. He got very, very muddy in the woods and he had to go in the shower to be rinsed off. So he's still a little bit damp, extra soft and fluffy, and he's keeping close to me because I was not the one who put him in the shower. So he feels like he's safe with me, but little does he know I would have insisted on the shower too. Alright, my boy.